So the art of taking it is, in a way, if you want to concentrate, not if you want to just enjoy the beauty or have good sex or enjoy nature, then you can let your sugar level fall. But if you're wanting to concentrate on something cognitive, then you need your sugar level to be sharp. When I learned about how to use psychedelics for what I consider the improvement of myself, I realized this is the mission I've been looking for in life.
Lucydelic.
LSD, I learned its wonderful advantages and fun and kind of ecstasy you can have through it. But at the same time, I didn't think, I also experienced its threats and its closeness to insanity. So that was kind of taking it without any knowledge of how it works. So I was conscious of its wonderfulness, but also of its dangers. And then I had this trauma, and someone, in order to take advantage of me, he had a bottle of Sandoz LSD and he poured it into my coffee. And I died and was reborn and blah, 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 trauma. And then after a while I retired to the country, and then someone came and said, come on Amanda, you must come out, come to a party in London. Ravi Shankar, I remember Ravi Shankar was playing at the party, so I went. And there I met a Dutch scientist called Bart Hoekes. Anyway, he changed my life in a sense, because he had a hypothesis of how LSD works in the brain. He'd been the top kind of medical student in Amsterdam. All the professors wanted him, and he'd been a subject in an LSD study, and he'd been thinking, now what is the underlying mechanisms to bring about this change? And a hypothesis of how it increases the volume of blood in the brain capillaries, and therefore increases the energy to the brain, and therefore you have billions more brain cells combusting simultaneously, so hence the expanded state of consciousness. And to me it made a lot of sense, and brain cells are late in evolution, and therefore their use of glucose is extravagant. And so if you have billions more like hungry cows in a clover field, they eat a lot of glucose and your sugar level drops. And that's when you get what we call sugar lack. The blood sugar level falls below what you can keep concentration on. And I was very familiar with that, because when my father came back from the war when I was 2 or something, he was a bad diabetic. And I became his carer, who went everywhere with him like his beloved pet dog or something, and put sugar in his mouth when he passed out, which he did regularly. And so I grew up with a life of sugar maintenance. And so it became a very natural thing for me to think, yes, to keep concentration, it's a combination for me. It was of being a farmer's daughter. You know, you have to irrigate land to get fertility. Mm-hmm. Same with the brain. And then keeping the glucose level normal to keep your concentration. And so that was part of what I discovered at that point. And the other part was about the ego mechanism in the brain. And I won't go into that now, but it was an incredibly, for me, meaningful explanation of how we survived originally when we took the upright position and lost some blood from the brain because of gravity. Blood is heavier than cerebral spinal fluid. So in the upright position, you have many advantages, like you can run and see further and all those sort of things. But one disadvantage, which is you lose a volume of blood from the brain. And to compensate for that, we developed, stronger than other animals, a kind of reinsuring, a self identity through the use of words, through the use of sounds which have meaning. And it became an internal conditioned reflex of hearing a word, having a meaning attached to it, and then that directs the blood to a certain place in the brain. And so that's how we built a system called the ego, which is a conditioned reflex mechanism to control the distribution of blood. And when I first learned how to use them, we actually lived on LSD, quite big doses most days, and used it to work. Our fun was working, studying the human condition, studying physiology, all that. That was our game. And so I found I could work at a better level on LSD if I kept my sugar level normal. So the art of taking it is, in a way, if you want to concentrate, not if you want to just enjoy the beauty or have good sex or enjoy nature, then you can let your sugar level fall. But if you're wanting to concentrate on something cognitive, then you need your sugar level to be sharpened. So you either need to get that through adrenaline, which does it naturally, or to eat extra sugar to balance the extra blood. And so for years, that's what we were doing, eating a lot of extra glucose while we worked and not getting fat on it. So we used it, because otherwise you would have put on weight if you weren't using this extra energy. So, phase in a sense. Now, I'm currently setting up a program of research. I mean, I don't want to bore you with how I got here.
It was one of my following.
But when I learned about how to use psychedelics for what I consider the improvement of myself, I realized this is the mission I've been looking for in life. And I realized that this was in 67, 8, 9, that sort of time, when the prohibition came down on psychedelics. I realized that the only way to overcome the new state of prohibition was with the very best science to demonstrate. Science is a religion of the modern times. They killed off spirituality and replaced it with science. So I realized that only by doing the very best science to demonstrate scientifically how these compounds work and why they're beneficial would we win through the taboo. Because in the late 70s you couldn't even talk about psychedelics without your children. People wouldn't want to play with your children because you were taboo. It was a very taboo thing at that point. It became the enemy of the people, Nixon, that whole period. Probably you weren't born. But it was, it was a period when one was walking down the street, if one was laughing and you saw a policeman, you'd stop laughing because then maybe you'd be searched. It was a strange time. It was a very, very strange time because it was a time of immense breaking through culturally. It was a very exciting time. The 60s, amazing. New art, new music, new ideas, new spirituality, all of that. It was a wonderful time. But at the same time was the conflict with authorities who were trying to stamp it out. So that was a strange time. So then how does one die? I left school at 16, so it wasn't obvious how I could, as a single female without money, bring about the changes I wanted to with global drug policy. You had to change global drug and open the doors to do research to prove the benefits of these compounds. So that was the predicament. So for 30 years, me, Bart Huggers and Joe Mellon, we worked together to think how we break through, how does one. Bart was prohibited from coming into England for no reason, very English. Silently, he was asked to leave England by, at night, a man from the Foreign Office came, very politely knocking on the door, saying, I'm sorry, Mr. Huggers, I'm afraid we have to ask you to leave England now. So we left, me and Bart, we went away, thinking he could get back in a week. And he couldn't get back for about 20 years.
Once upon a trip.
Once upon a trip.
Lucydelic.